The grand ballroom of the Carlton estate shimmered with golden chandeliers, silk drapes, and the polished marble floors reflecting every flicker of candlelight. Guests whispered in awe, sipping champagne as the Tycoon's daughter prepared to walk down the aisle. Cameras clicked. Reporters lingered near the back, eager to capture what was supposed to be the society wedding of the year. Everything was perfect, until a sudden scream cut through the music. A little girl, standing near the edge of the aisle, clutched a teddy bear to her chest and pointed with wide, terrified eyes. "Stop! The handkerchief is poisoned," she cried, her small voice echoing louder than the choir. The entire room froze. The bride's hand trembled, her father's proud smile collapsed into a frown, and the groom stiffened as every head turned toward the child. Gasps rippled across the guests like a wave crashing against stone. At first, some thought it was a prank, a child's wild imagination. But the little girl's trembling voice carried a weight that made even the most skeptical guests uneasy. The Tycoon, towering in his tailored suit, stepped forward. His sharp eyes darted from the girl to the embroidered handkerchief resting neatly in the groom's breast pocket. His jaw tightened. "Who told you that?" he demanded, his voice low but laced with authority. The girl clutched her teddy bear tighter, her chin quivering. I saw them dip it in something before the ceremony." Her words fell like stones into the silence, each one echoing in the ears of the shocked guests. The groom's face drained of color. He fumbled, tugging at his pocket as murmurs swelled. The bride's veil shook as she staggered backward, staring at the man she was moments away from marrying. Whispers turned into chaos as guests leaned toward each other, questioning in hushed but frantic tones. The groom's hands shook as he pulled the handkerchief free. All eyes locked on the delicate white fabric with its embroidered initials. The Tycoon's voice thundered, silencing the noise. "Hold it out, now." Reluctantly, the groom extended the cloth. The Tycoon snatched it with surprising swiftness, his expression dark and unreadable. He brought it closer, his sharp nose twitching. Then his eyes narrowed, there was a faint, acrid scent beneath the perfume meant to disguise it. The bride's mother covered her mouth with a trembling hand. "Oh my God," she whispered. The Tycoon turned, holding the handkerchief high. "This wedding stops here." His roar filled the ballroom like an explosion, and the chandeliers above seemed to shiver with the weight of his words. The bride staggered back, nearly collapsing into the arms of her maid of honor. Her veil trembled as she looked at her groom with wide, betrayed eyes. "Is this true? Did you plan this?" The groom stammered, sweat dripping from his forehead. "And no, it's a mistake, I don't know how that got there." His voice cracked, desperation rising in every word. But the Tycoon wasn't listening. His face was stone, his hand still clutching the poisoned handkerchief like evidence in a courtroom. He turned to the guests. "This ceremony is over. Everyone out." Chaos erupted. Chairs screeched against marble as people hurried toward the doors, whispers turning into shouts. The once grand wedding dissolved into a frenzy of fear and scandal. The little girl stood frozen in place, clutching her teddy tighter, her small eyes filled with both terror and relief. She had spoken the truth, and saved the day. Security guards rushed into the ballroom, their radios crackling as they pushed through the crowd. The Tycoon's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Seal the doors. No one leaves until we find out who brought this poison here." The groom's face turned pale as he tried to step back, but two guards immediately blocked his path. Beads of sweat rolled down his temple, his collar tightening like a noose. The bride's tears smeared her makeup as she cried out, "Tell me the truth. Were you trying to hurt me?" "I swear I wasn't," the groom shouted, his voice trembling. "I would never, someone set me up." But the Tycoon wasn't convinced. He stepped closer, his eyes burning with fury. "Then explain why the handkerchief in your pocket smells of poison." The ballroom was silent again, all eyes fixed on the man who just minutes earlier was about to become part of one of the wealthiest families in the country. The groom's hands shook violently as he tried to speak. I don't know how it got there. Someone must have slipped it into my pocket. The tycoon's gaze was unrelenting. His booming voice filled the room. You expect me to believe that? On my daughter's wedding day? In my own house? The bride, her dress shimmering under the chandeliers, looked as though her entire world had shattered. She backed away, her sobs breaking the silence. You were supposed to protect me, and now I don't even know who you are. One of the guards stepped forward, pulling a small vial from his coat. Sir, we'll test the cloth immediately. If it contains toxins, we'll know in seconds. The guests huddled together, whispering like frightened schoolchildren. The once festive ballroom now felt like a courtroom, one where the groom stood trial before the world. The tycoon leaned closer, his voice dropping into a deadly calm. If this is true, then this marriage will never happen. The guard carefully dropped the handkerchief into a clear vial, shaking a few drops of testing liquid over the fabric. All eyes followed the slow reaction, the silence so thick it felt like the air itself was holding its breath. Within seconds, the liquid turned a deep, sickly green. A collective gasp echoed through the hall. The tycoon's face darkened, his jaw like stone. He lifted the vial for everyone to see. Poison, he declared. Confirmed. The bride screamed, collapsing into her mother's arms. The groom tried to rush toward her, but the guards grabbed him by both arms, holding him in place. His voice cracked with panic. It wasn't me. I swear, I didn't do this. Please, you have to believe me. But the tycoon raised a single hand, silencing the room again. His words were sharp, final, and deadly serious. This wedding is cancelled. Effective immediately. The groom thrashed in the guard's grip, his voice echoing with desperation. Please, listen. Someone is framing me, I don't even know why this is happening. But the tycoon's eyes, cold and unwavering, cut through his pleas. Enough. You've disgraced my family, endangered my daughter, and nearly turned this sacred day into a funeral. The bride looked up through her tears, her voice trembling. How could you let this happen? Was anything you told me real? Her words seemed to pierce deeper than any guard's grip. The groom froze, his mouth opening but no sound escaping. His silence was louder than any confession. The tycoon turned to his head of security. Call the authorities. This man doesn't leave this estate without an escort. Gasps and murmurs swept across the guests again. What was supposed to be a day of joy had transformed into a scandal that would ripple through society for years. And yet, in the corner, the little girl still clutched her teddy bear, watching quietly as the truth unfolded, knowing her scream had stopped something far darker from happening. Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder by the second. Guests whispered nervously, some shielding their faces as if fearing tomorrow's headlines. Reporters outside the estate already smelled blood in the water. The groom's voice cracked as he pleaded with the tycoon one last time. Please. I love your daughter, I would never harm her. You have to believe me. But the tycoon's face was carved from granite. He stepped closer, his voice low enough to cut like a knife. Love does not come in the form of poison. The bride sobbed harder, her wedding gown crumpled as she sank to the floor. She turned her head away, unable to look at the man she once called her future. Two uniformed officers stormed into the ballroom. The guests parted instantly, their footsteps echoing like a judge's gavel. The groom's knees buckled as the cuffs clicked shut around his wrists. As he was dragged toward the doors, the little girl's eyes followed him. She whispered softly, almost to herself, I just wanted to save her. The doors swung open, and flashes from reporters' cameras lit up the night as the groom was escorted out in handcuffs. The once celebrated man now looked like a criminal paraded before the world. Guests shielded their faces, knowing the scandal would stain them simply by association. Inside the ballroom, the bride collapsed into a chair, her veil torn and her cheeks streaked with ruined makeup. Her trembling hands clutched at her father's arm. How could I have been so blind?" she whispered. The Tycoon wrapped a protective arm around her shoulders. His voice, though still stern, softened for his daughter. "You were deceived. But you are safe now, that's what matters." The little girl stood awkwardly nearby, unsure if she had done the right thing. For a moment, she feared the Tycoon might be angry at her for causing chaos. But then he turned, his expression softening as he knelt down to her level. "You saved my daughter's life," he said quietly. "And for that, I owe you everything." The girl's eyes widened. No one had ever spoken to her with such respect before. The girl's small fingers clutched her teddy bear tighter as the Tycoon placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. The towering man who had commanded fear from an entire ballroom now looked at her with genuine gratitude. "You were brave when everyone else stayed silent," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "That kind of courage can't be bought." The bride, still shaken, lifted her tear-streaked face to the girl. "If you hadn't spoken up, I don't even want to think about what could have happened." Her voice cracked as she reached out, pulling the girl into a trembling embrace. Guests watched in stunned silence. What had begun as a spectacle of wealth and power was now a moment of raw humanity. The Tycoon's daughter clung to the little girl as though she were her guardian angel. Even the security guards, hardened men used to chaos, lowered their eyes with respect. For the first time that night, the girl felt safe. She realized her scream had not just stopped a wedding, it had saved a life and changed the course of everything. The ballroom, once buzzing with scandal and fear, settled into a strange quiet. The guests whispered in awe, realizing they had witnessed something that would be told for generations. Police cars pulled away from the estate, carrying the disgraced groom into the night. His fall from grace was swift and irreversible. Reporters outside shouted questions, but no answers came, the truth was already loud enough. Inside, the Tycoon rose to his full height, his arms still around his daughter. He looked at the girl once more, his voice carrying the weight of finality. "This wedding is not ruined, it is saved. My daughter lives because of you." The bride lifted her veil, her tear-streaked face glowing with gratitude. "I owe you my future," she whispered to the girl. For the first time that evening, the little girl smiled, a shy, trembling smile. She hadn't come seeking attention or glory, she had only spoken the truth. But in doing so, she had stopped a tragedy and brought down a man who thought he could hide behind wealth and charm. As the chandeliers above flickered softly, the Tycoon ordered the doors reopened, not for celebration, but for freedom. The wedding was cancelled, but the truth had prevailed. And in the center of it all, a small child clutching a teddy bear had become the unexpected hero who changed everything. Weeks later, newspapers and magazines still carried headlines about the wedding that never happened. Society gossips dissected every detail, but one truth remained clear: the courage of a child had changed the course of powerful lives. The disgraced groom sat behind bars, awaiting trial. His empire of charm and lies had crumbled overnight. Meanwhile, the Tycoon moved swiftly, reinforcing his family's security and vowing never again to be blinded by appearances. As for the bride, she found strength in survival. No longer the naive woman who almost married danger, she grew more determined than ever to live life on her own terms. And the little girl? She became a symbol of bravery. The Tycoon quietly ensured her family was cared for, providing her with opportunities she had never imagined. Yet she never sought riches or fame, only the comfort of knowing she had spoken the truth when it mattered most. The wedding was remembered not for its grandeur, but for the scream that stopped it all, a warning that saved a life and unmasked a lie. And sometimes, history is written not by kings or tycoons, but by the smallest voice in the room. Months later, the Carlton estate had returned to its quiet splendor. The scandal had faded from front-page news, but whispers still lingered in high society gatherings: the poisoned handkerchief, the shattered wedding, and the little girl who saved it all. One evening, the Tycoon hosted a private dinner, far smaller than the extravagant events he was known for. The bride, no longer bound to a life of pretense, sat beside him, her smile genuine for the first time in months. Across from them sat the little girl and her family, honored guests at the Tycoon's table. Lifting his glass, the Tycoon spoke with rare humility. Wealth can build walls, buy diamonds, and command crowds. But it cannot replace truth, and it cannot replace courage. Tonight, we honor the bravest among us. All eyes turned to the child, who blushed and hugged her teddy bear close. The room erupted in applause, not for the Tycoon, not for his wealth, but for the small girl whose scream had echoed louder than all the chandeliers combined. The story of the poisoned handkerchief would be told again and again, but at its heart, it was never about power, poison, or betrayal. It was about one child's voice that refused to be silent, and changed everything. Years later, the tale of the wedding that never was still echoed through city streets and drawing rooms. It became more than gossip, it became legend. Teachers told it as a lesson in truth. Journalists retold it as proof that power can crumble in a heartbeat. The Tycoon's daughter rebuilt her life, stronger and wiser, carving her own path free of the shadows of betrayal. Her father, once seen only as a figure of wealth and authority, was remembered for something greater, his humility in honoring the smallest voice that saved them all. And the little girl? She grew into a young woman known not for scandal, but for bravery. Opportunities opened before her, but she never forgot that night, the fear, the scream, the silence that followed, and the life she helped save. The poisoned handkerchief was locked away as evidence, but its story lived on as a warning. Deceit can hide in the finest silk, yet truth will always cut through. In the end, the grand wedding never took place. But what did happen was far more powerful. A scream became a legacy, and a child with a teddy bear proved that even the smallest voice can stop the darkest of lies.